Hey everybody! It's a very fine line between stupid and clever. And in this guitar's case, that line is as thin as a needle. An acupuncture needle to be exact. This might be, I think, maybe, the world's only acupuncture needle-based epoxy thin line guitar. Ooh, look at that. So I've made a couple other videos playing with epoxy in guitars, but they got really heavy. So I decided to make something really thin, about an inch or 3/4 of an inch thin, and embed acupuncture needles in the guitar to make a like metallic stainless steel sunburst effect. So I had an awful lot of fun building this. I was planning this for months. It's got a steel body center block that actually I pirated from a travel guitar idea I had before in a previous video. Anyway, I've got the whole build video coming up here. I hope you like it. If you feel like subscribing, go ahead. If you don't want to, I don't care. Hope you enjoy it. Thanks. So there's the first step in this wild project is I am sterilizing a whole bunch of used acupuncture needles. Now keep in mind, acupuncture needles are never sterilized and reused as acupuncture needles. That would be very bad. They're made of stainless steel. You only ever insert them through the skin once, and then they are discarded unless you're a wacko like me and you're going to do an art project out of them. So I got this big pot of water. I'm going to let this boil for a while, and I hope to God my wife does not come in. So in order to reproduce my yin yang logo here, I managed conveniently to find these silicone molds for yin and yang. They're soap molds for yin and yang of shapes. And I managed to use the alcohol inks to closely mimic the colors even of my logo. And so we're going to see how these look as I pop them out of their little molds. They're really flexible, so they come out really easily. I only poured like 9 milliliters into each one of the molds, and that should give me plenty to work with. There's one half. Oh, like a, oh, that's, oh, it might have been a little soon to pop out. Be very careful with that. I wanna... They've been in the molds for maybe 5 hours. Probably not fully hardened. And the tail end is just a little bit flexible, so we'll be very careful with that. But these look really good. And they fit together. Voila. Whoops, great. There you go. Off to a good start. Bend that back into place, we'll be fine. So here's my Telecaster body mold, and in order to figure out how much epoxy, the exact volume I need to make the top laminate, I've filled the mold with water right up to the level where the neck pocket starts. So this is the front of the guitar down to the level of the neck pocket, and then I know that the 1-inch surface will include the base that supports the neck. And now I'm going to take this volume of water and pour it into a measuring cup so that then I can estimate the entire amount of epoxy that I'm going to need, and then I'll figure out the separate volumes of each pour before I plan out the actual body. And just enough left over of this ice cast epoxy that turned out to be about 3/4 of a liter, mixed it all up, and I went ahead and made my first pour. This should give me plenty of material to level sand out all the imperfections and things. And this is nice and shallow, so I'll be able to come around and get rid of any bubbles with my creme brulee torch. Those little guys there will all just kind of vanish right away. And this is a slow curing epoxy, so this is going to take a while. But then this gives me a nice place to start with adding the needles and the rest of the cool stuff. So I needed to make a stethoscope superimposed over the yin-yang sign. So I simply made a template on the cured epoxy and then painted it on so I could place the epoxy yin-yang right over it. So after filling in the contralateral dots there with the appropriate colored epoxy and level sanding the logo
and everything, and making it in the reverse orientation because it's backwards. I then have mixed up a little bit of epoxy and glued the logo into the base of the guitar. So now after that cures, I can start laying in the acupuncture needles in a radial pattern and see how that looks. So that was the first round of acupuncture needles around the logo, and so far I really like it. I can't wait to see what it's going to look like from the other end, but I'm going to let that little bit of epoxy cure that's kind of holding the handles before I dump another round of epoxy around the edge of the handles, and we'll put another layer in and keep moving from there.
So laying out the acupuncture needles was kind of a zen-like task. It was really very enjoyable, but it took quite a bit of time. I was mixing up about 3 milliliters of epoxy at a time and pouring a nice round line around the edge that would give me enough epoxy to glue down a row of needles, and it took probably about 5 sittings to do all this. Thankfully, I planned around the cavity for the pickup, and I avoided putting needles in that very area. I later found out when I was making the jack plate hole that cutting the epoxy through the stainless steel was quite difficult.
Okay, something like 5 hours later, the metal burst layer is done. Next step is to pour over some clear epoxy to get them all sealed in there. Okay, so it's been about 3 days since this is cured. It's got 3 layers in it. There's the lower layer that's about 1/4 inch thick of clear epoxy, and then I've got the middle layer that encases the needle layer, and then another 1/4 inch layer on top of that that's got a tinted blue epoxy. It's time to unmold it and see how it looks. Really excited. Here we go. Oh boy. Ooh, it's coming out really easy. Oh. Electric shock from that. Ooh. Ah. There we have it. So far, so good. Now, there's quite a bit of things to clean up on the top. It needs to be totally level sanded and cleaned up and shined up. But the blue tint in it is actually really quite subtle. It's not very strong, but I really love the way the light reflects on the acupuncture needles. And I love the way the logo came out in the center. That's gonna be really cool. Very happy. So my original design was to laminate the epoxy top to a pine wood base to give it the full dimensions of a guitar bass, and also keep the weight down because the epoxy is so heavy. I'm a little bit, as I was mocking this up, I was noticing that it kind of limits the light as it shines through the epoxy onto the needles, which I really dig that sunburst pattern. So I came up with a secondary idea. I'm going to finish both sides of the epoxy and clean, and then I'm going to mount the 3/4 inch epoxy body into the metal frame of my travel guitar. I really no longer use this as a travel guitar, because once the airline rules were clearly stated that you can bring a guitar on any airplane, this is kind of just sat in my office as a conversation tool, because it's kind of cool. I got a whole video on this build too if you were interested. But now I've decided that I'm going to meld these two together. I'm going to add this body to this metal frame guitar, and that will allow the light to come through it, and it should keep the weight down still. It'll still be closer to 9 pounds, but that's still, I think, usable. It's my Les Paul with a Bigsby on it is about 8.5 pounds. So that gives us the next step. And then if I ever want to tear this apart and then go back the laminate route with wood, I can always do that later.
Okay, so after about a half an hour of level sanding with 80 grit sandpaper, I've gotten all the defects in the top off, including where the pickup cavity was, and that's all gonna polish out smooth. And then on the back, same thing. All of the raised edges that went all the way around were cleaned up. I left the edges alone. I'm probably not even gonna try and refinish those. I don't think I can really improve on those, and it's so hard to get the curved surfaces. So now that I've got the front and the back level sanded, I'm going to start the polishing process, where I will work my way up in grit from probably, let's see, this was 80 grit. I'll probably go to 220, then 300, 400, and then I'll start wet sanding. I've got all my wet sanding sandpapers up here. I've got 1500, 2000, 2500, 3000, 4000, 5000, what is that, 7,000 and 10,000. And then probably then take a rubbing compound with an auto polisher on top of that next, followed by an auto polish, and it'll clean it up really nicely. So note to self, if you need to cut holes through epoxy that is reinforced with a bunch of stainless steel, as in acupuncture needles, it's going to take a little time. It was a bear cutting these holes out for the jack and for the pickups. For the pickup, I ended up having to use a drill to drill out multiple holes through the steel, and then grinding out the edges with a one of these Dremel kind of grinding stones, and that took a long time. It was a real hassle. So I'd plan ahead next time if I were going to do something like this. But overall, I'm really pleased with the way it's come out. I'm looking forward to building it up on the steel spine. So I'm finally getting ready to assemble this guy. I've got the steel backbone all painted up, aluminum in shape. I drilled a couple more holes towards the top of the neck pocket where I'm going to be able to secure the body to the metal frame, and also using kind of a little piece of aluminum as a bracket, kind of instead of a washer kind of thing. The bridge is going to be holding the body on to the metal bracket through its holes right here. I managed to make the jack plate hole big enough to fit so the plug comes in. And actually, when the plug comes in, it's going to sit a little bit proud. Because the body is so thin, I obviously ran into like a wiring concern. So I ended up routing a deep trench here from the back of the metal cabinet here behind the pickup. That'll swing by one of the mounting screws to the bridge to pick up the ground, so I can ground the strings, and then onto the jack right there. Overall, I don't think it's going to be very noticeable from the front of the guitar. It'll be pretty cool, but we're getting closer to building it up and seeing how it sounds. I'm just digging the way the light dances around all the needles, especially in the edges where you don't see the thickness of the needles, but the reflection of the light continues back there. I'm just really proud of this. Ooh.
That's going to do it for this version of the fine line between stupid and clever. Thanks for taking the time to watch. Like I said, I don't really care if you subscribe or not. I just hope you know that I'm enjoying making videos and making guitars. I hope to be building a few more epoxy-esque guitars in the near future. So stay tuned. I'll make a few more videos. Have a great day, and thanks again for watching.